Hi, my friends. J.R. Dukes at your service. Appreciate everybody joining me here today. We just hit the go-go button, so we're going to get started right away. Make sure everybody can hear me real quick. If you have any questions or concerns, any audio quality, whatever, please put them in the comments so I know. Looks like we're sounding good on X. Welcome to everyone on the X platform. Of course, you can always find me at Reach, J.R. Dukes on X. I've been making a bunch of comments on a whole list of subjects pertaining to SWEET, New York Attorney General Letitia James. So make sure y'all check me out on there. And of course, hello to my friends on YouTube and of course our friends on Twitch. All right, looking good. If you would like to join me, if you have a question, you want to make a comment, you just want to call in, the link is now in the chat. Just click on it and the instructions are pretty simple and self-explanatory. If you are a returning subscriber, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be able to have a chat with you about what's going on today in the world. If you're new to the channel, I am J.R. Dukes. I'm your host. I am all about ending the dreaded disease of indoctrination, understanding the world we live in, and as a result, you can live your best life possible. In order to live your best life, you have to understand the world we live in. I'd love to talk about politics, anything to deal with legal affairs, the people that we elect to these positions of trust and authority over us, if you will. We need to make sure we're holding these people accountable and we understand exactly what they're about or not about. And that's, in a nutshell, what I am all about and what I try to bring to you whenever we have our chit-chats together. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do, because that way, as I got a video that goes out or I go live, you are informed. Without further ado, we're going to jump into it right now. Looks like everything's working good. So, main thing today is going to be this case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Let me go ahead and pull that up. We are going to be talking about this particular executive order signed by President Donald Trump. I think he signed it back sometime near the end of January. We'll look and see exactly what the date is on it. It just made its way up to the Supreme Court today, and I listened to all of the oral arguments today, and it's extremely interesting. Before we close today, I'm going to give you my decided predictions on exactly how I think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to rule on two things. Number one, whether or not they are going to put an end to what's called birthright citizenship. And that's what we're going to take a deep dive on today. Additionally, I'm going to tell you what I predict is going to be the results of, it's kind of a side issue, but a very important issue. And I would argue it's probably the most important issue that's been before the Supreme Court in quite some time, even more important in my estimation than the birthright citizenship subject, because what they're going to decide is if all of these judges, let's see, I believe there's 680 of these federal judges, these so-called district courts, if you will. And the problem that we have had is that these district courts are allowed to effectively block the agenda of whatever president is in the White House at that particular time. Now, I want to state briefly, the way it used to work is, let's just say back in the day, so to speak, 1960 and prior, and it was real rare even in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that really didn't start to gain momentum until sometime during, I'd say, Bill Clinton's administration, definitely the George W. Bush administration in the 2000s. And it has exponentially increased under President Donald Trump. And that is this forum shopping, where basically you don't like a decision or an executive order of the president. So what do? You go to court to stop it. And we all know how this game is played. Basically, you find the jurisdiction that's going to be the most favorable to your cause. You go in and you get the judge to agree with you that a particular decision is unconstitutional. And it just basically stifles, if not outright stops, the agenda of whatever president is in office. Now, some of us may think, well, that's a good thing. Some may think that's a bad thing. I personally think it's a bad thing. Again, the way it used to work back in the day is that the entire United States is split into different, let's just say, jurisdictions. You would have like the First Circuit, Second Circuit, and so on. And essentially, you go to a particular circuit, and let's just say a judge says, hey, I'm going to enjoin, I'm going to give you an injunction, I'm going to stop, whatever. That's fine. It stopped it only for that circuit. In recent times, as we all know too well, now when some judge, let's say in Hawaii, says something's unconstitutional, a judge, one of 680 non-elected judges all the way out in Hawaii can basically stop something that's going on in my home state of Florida. It's just got carried away, ladies and gentlemen, and it has to be stopped. And I'm glad for one to see it stop. We got 15 folks already on the X platform. Thanks for being here. We got 4 friends on YouTube so far and our friends on Twitch. Thank you all for being here. Now, we're going to drill into this in 1 second. I just want to touch base on a few things in Trump world. On this particular channel, y'all know that I have been talking for a long time about former President Joe Biden. I mean, come on, let's talk about it and let's say exactly what's obvious. I mean, I don't know how long it's been. It's been well over a year and a half. I've been talking about this. Everybody can tell something was seriously wrong with Joe Biden. And again, I'm not picking on the man. I definitely don't agree with his politics or, for the most part, just about anything that he stood for, that he did for the country. But what I will say, it was really clear that what was going on was definitely elder abuse. There was a conspiracy, huge lies perpetrated by the media and all the people, all the handlers around former President Joe Biden. It was clear that there was some kind of serious mental decline. On this particular channel, we talked about, hey, does he have some type of dementia? I believe Lewy body dementia is what we kind of came up with. I don't have any direct facts to base that on. We just have speculated over the last year and a half, as to what the president might be suffering from. And we all have older friends, relatives, whatnot, and we all are aware that if you live long enough, you have enough family members, you're bound to see something like this in your family. But the problem with President Joe Biden was he was the commander in chief, and that is the problem. And they have been lying to us. And so you got people like Jake Tapper and a lot of these other nuts that's been out there forever, what we call gaslighting us, saying, hey, don't believe your lying eyes. You can't believe what you're seeing with your own eyes and hearing with your own ears. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with Joe Biden. Well, guess what? In this article right here in The Hill, the Pacific side is thehill.com. Biden didn't recognize George Clooney last year. Can you believe that? And this is a new book that just came out. When I first heard this, I'm like, man, it's all going to come out now. Now, Jake Tapper and some of these other folks, what do you think is going on? They want money. That's all about writing a book, getting paid for speeches or promo events or whatever. And that's exactly what's going on. All of a sudden, these people are having what I would call a come to Jesus meeting, right? Okay, well, I don't buy it. I don't believe them. I don't believe they are being sincere. Even George Clooney knew something was wrong with President Biden, despite his public comments to the opposite in that effect. I want to touch briefly on this here. President Biden didn't recognize actor George Clooney at a fundraiser in the last month of his 2024 campaign, according to an excerpt in a forthcoming book. Now, the name of that book is Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Well, you know, these people lied. These people engaged in these activities of covering up, and then they're surprised that they ended up losing the election. I personally wouldn't think it would make any difference whatsoever, Biden's decline. It was clear nobody wanted what the Biden administration stood for, despite having the liberal news media in their pocket 100% of the time. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I want to make sure everybody understands that. By the way, if you haven't done so and you would like to, please put in the comments, say hello, let us know where you are from. I'd like to see where everybody is from. It always piques my interest. Any questions, put them in the comments. What do you think about this story? Did you guys agree with me? Is it not just a matter of profit that they're looking for right now? I mean, it's funny how they're all coming to Jesus, so to speak, right? They're having these mea culpas, you know, hey, we got it wrong. I'm not buying it for 1 second. Also, I wanted to update us. This is some good news on a story that I have been following on this channel. We're all familiar with, was that DiMaggio or Louis? What's that guy in New York that shot that, or is accused of shooting that healthcare executive from United Healthcare, that Maggiano? This particular guy, he had some saying on the bullet, something like deny, decline, delay, whatever. It was supposedly written in part or duplicate of a book that was out, I believe, around 2011. there was this young lady that we have been following on this channel, and you'll see this article right here. It's in the, what's the name of the site? It's, it's the Lakeland LKLDnow.com news site. If you'd like a link to it, just ask me and I'll send you the link. This particular lady was talking with Blue Cross of Florida on the phone, and they denied her claim. This is a serious problem in the healthcare industry. Too many of us are needing medical care, and we have these bureaucrats deciding who gets care and who doesn't get care. I mean, we can all clearly see the frustration with the system that we have and the way the system works right now. It just seems highly inappropriate, wholly unfair. This particular lady was on the phone with Blue Cross, and near the end of the conversation, the allegations are she said something to the effect of delay, deny, whatever. And the FBI tipped off the local sheriff's office. I believe it's actually in right here in Lakeland, but not too far from where I reside myself. But she was arrested and charged with very serious crimes. Well, I'm happy to report, ladies and gentlemen, charges dropped for Lakeland woman accused of threatening insurance worker. And of course, it was in Lakeland, Florida, just outside. It's considered part of the Tampa Bay region. I just wanted to take a quick peek at this here. Brianna Boston and Blue Cross Blue Shield reached an agreement after the woman apologized. I guess that's good. It's sad that she was arrested. She's a mother, I think, of 2 or 3 children. She has a husband, no criminal record, but let's take a peek at it because it is overall good news. The state attorney's office dropped second-degree felony charges against a Lakeland woman for allegedly making a veiled threat against a health insurance company. Assistant State Attorney Joseph McCarthy said Brianna Boston, 42, has made a sincere apology in a statement to Blue Cross Blue Shield and to the company's representative, and that both Blue Cross Blue Shield and the representative are, quote, satisfied and not seeking any sanctions against, end quote, Miss Boston. They also cited Boston's lack of criminal history and her sincere remorse regarding her offensive conduct in this incident. On December 10th, Boston was discussing her medical coverage with a BCBS worker who informed her that her claim had been turned down. A case filing evaluation from the state's attorney general's office said she was turned down because she had not updated her information by completing a coordination of benefits, whatever that is, some form that she allegedly did not fill out. I have my suspicions that that might not be the truth or even the whole truth, if you know exactly what I mean. The arrest affidavit, and this is a quote from it, near the end of the call, Boston stated in sum and substance the following: delay, deny, depose. You people are next, end quote. Imagine that. You say these words: delay, deny, depose, you people are next, end quote. And you end up with the sheriff's department going out, arresting you and charging you with very, very serious crimes like terroristic threats, this type of stuff. Just kind of shocks the conscience, in my humble opinion. Let me know if you agree with me. I'm curious. I think it's ridiculous. How is the words delay, deny, depose some type of physical threat against another human being? I don't get that at all. But anyway, these were the charges, and this was the result. It says 2 of the 3 words, delay, deny, were etched on a bullet shell casing found at the scene of the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York City on December 4th. The words are an apparent reference to tactics used by insurance companies to deny coverage to customers. A Lakeland police officer and the FBI agent spoke with Boston. LPD forwarded charges against her, and a judge confirmed probable cause to proceed. But BCBS, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Boston came to a mutual agreement, and McCarthy wrote on February 14th, Valentine's Day, ain't that nice and appropriate? Boston will not be prosecuted for this interest. Well, God bless their souls, right? Boston could not be reached for comment. I'm sure she could not be reached for comment. It just, to me, folks, that just unconscionable. It's ridiculous. It shows how the law can definitely be turned against you in an instant. And just because you're charged with something does not by any stretch mean you're guilty. You know what? This is one of the things I'm very passionate about, and I love to talk about on my channel, is how to deal with law enforcement, how to deal with police. And in this case, And again, this is no shade on Miss Boston. She's been through a terrible ordeal. She should tune in and listen to someone like me, because if you follow my advice, and again, I'm just telling you my opinion, I'm not giving legal advice. My advice is I would never, never, never talk to a law enforcement agent, specifically when they come over unannounced and they're asking me about some type of potential crime that I may or may not have committed. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But what happens most of the time, folks, when law enforcement or somebody comes to talk to us, we freak out. I mean, that's just what it is. Our heart starts pounding. We start sweating. We start getting upset because most of us in our day-to-day lives are not used to dealing with law enforcement, police, FBI, all of the different law enforcement agencies that we have. And listen, God bless our police, men and women in uniform. The overwhelming vast majority of them are very good people, and we need our police. But that doesn't mean there's not problems. That doesn't mean there's not overreach. It does not mean that we all need to be taught the things that are taught to the children of judges, the children of DA, prosecutors, the children of police officers. Why should you not know this same information? And the information is what I am talking about right now. You don't talk to them. You just say something real polite. Hey, listen, I would love to talk with you and answer whatever questions you got. I would like to get your name, number, whatever. I will have a legal representative, aka an attorney, contact you to facilitate this. And that's it. That's it. Nothing more. Now, I have had people before say, oh, JR, you know, what happens if you have a fire in your house or you need police assistance? You know, do you never, you know, you don't talk to police in that situation, right? Oh, okay, you got me. I did say never. We have to use a degree of common sense when we're talking. Obviously, if you have an emergency, a medical emergency, a fire, whatever, you're going to want to talk to the first responders, the police officers, this type of information. I'm talking about the specific situation where the police are coming over unannounced. That is a serious red flag. The police, anyone in the executive branch of government, they are not there to give you pointers on how to be a better citizen. They're not there to give you pointers on how you should conduct yourself. They're there to see if a crime was committed. If a crime was committed, they're there to make sure they make the arrests and pass it up to the judicial branch, the DA's office, the prosecutors, to hammer you to get resolution to whatever the particular problem is. Just remember that. I don't want to go off on that tangent. I love talking about it. It's very important to talk about. And I just want to make sure that I state that for the record. American Nana, thank you for being here, young ladies. Always a pleasure to have you in the chat. Thank you. Got about 25 folks on X now, 5 on YouTube, and our friends on Twitch. Thank you. I appreciate y'all taking time to tune in today. One more good piece of news before we drill into today's main story. Jeanine Pirro of Fox News. We all know Judge Pinheiro. I think I'm saying it right. How do y'all say your last name? Jeanine Pirro. We'll go with that. Sworn in. She was sworn in today as the interim U.S. attorney. President Trump announced her appointment last week. Remember, one of the appointments was pulled back, and then Donald Trump appointed her to be the U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. And I think that's a fantastic choice. We love Judge Jeanine. Always a very well-spoken, a very zealous advocate for America. I mean, it's just really just that simple, all right? Former Judge Jeanine Pirro was sworn in as U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. on Thursday. Pirro, 73, will now lead a team of attorneys in defending President Donald Trump's administration in court, as well as prosecuting local crimes in the nation's capital. Congratulations, Judge Jeanine, who will soon make D.C. great again. And that's per the director of the Office of Presidential Personnel wrote on social media. Well, more good news. Congratulations to Judge Jeanine. Glad to have you working with President Trump. Amen to that, right? Okay, let's go ahead and drill down on it today. I had the pleasure of taking some time and, well, I'm just like that. I love to listen to legal things, court things, whatever you want to call it. I listened to that case today. There is a case before the Supreme Court, and it is called what you see on the screen here, Trump versus CASA, Inc. Now, I'm not an expert on CASA, but the CASA that's in this particular suit, this is basically a consolidation of other cases. CASA is an organization that advocates, I believe, for immigrants in Massachusetts or one of the states on the East Coast. American Nana, Judge Pirro, is a big constitutionalist, right by the book. Amen. Absolutely. I love her, and I'm sure you do too. And she is a constitutionalist, and I say amen to that. Congratulate everyone involved on her appointment. And I know she's already hard working for each and every one of us. So the case today that was before the U.S. Supreme Court, very interesting oral arguments. I think in the future, if you guys have been with me a while, you know a lot of times I like to take a direct feed from the directly from the website at the United States Supreme Court and broadcast and talk about it at the same time. Very interesting. I love listening to the banter back and forth, and sometimes there are some hysterical moments that may take place from time to time. Rosemary Fiera, thank you for being here, young lady. It's always a pleasure to have you in the conversation today. So, this case was a consolidation of Trump versus Washington, Trump v. New Jersey. They do this oftentimes, folks. They'll take 2 or 3 cases that's worked its way up the U.S. Supreme Court, and they consolidate it. So the case title is officially Trump versus CASA Incorporated. Now, you may or may not be thinking yourself, hey, why is there a Supreme Court case in May as far as oral arguments? And you would be correct to answer that question, because it is highly unusual to have this type of case before the U.S. Supreme Court this particular time of the year. It's just generally not something they put on their docket or on their docket. But this particular situation was something the president's team brought to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it basically is going to be talking about 2 major things, 2 main categories, I guess you could say. The official category is, as we know, President Trump signed this order right here on your screen right now, this executive order. Order number 14160. And in effect, he put an end to what we call in the United States birthright citizenship. Just took a pen, signed it, and said it is over. And let's be straight up about it. There has been a lot of abuse in relation to birthright membership. Well, the president issued what we call an EO, executive order, that you see on your screen. It's only about 4 pages long. And the president thereby put an end to it. Well, as predicted, you have a lot of these liberals that said, hey, this is not something I'm going to tolerate. So they sued, and fortunately was put on a fast track to hit the U.S. Supreme Court, as evidenced by today's open dialogue, the actual arguments in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, there's one other caveat that's very, very important that I alluded to earlier. And it's kind of a subtext or a sub-subject of this particular case. And that is the president is asking the United States Supreme Court to put a stop to 680 lower court, AKA district judges. These are the federal courts we're talking about. These people are unelected. They are appointed by a president, and then the Senate will say yay or nay on their appointment. So basically, a Republican president is going to generally try to put people on the bench that are more conservative leaning. And then, of course, just the opposite for a Democratic president. They want judges that are more of the liberal type of thinking. That's pretty straight up. That's pretty straightforward. The problem, as we have talked about many times when we're talking about today, and the president wants the Supreme Court. See, folks, the Supreme Court is essentially the boss of these lower courts, these district courts. As a matter of fact, the Constitution doesn't say anything about these lower district courts as far as there needs to be 680 courts. It just has loosey-goosey language to the effect that the U.S. Supreme Court can set up these courts. All right, so there's a lot of latitude, a lot of difference, if you will, given to the U.S. Supreme Court, specifically Chief Justice John Roberts, as far as how he wants to affect the administration of these courts. And you may remember in the news, you might have seen President Trump basically pleading openly in public with Chief Justice John Roberts, saying, hey, please rein in these people. This is ridiculous. We have these 680 judges unelected. They're just appointed. They're on the bench. And what happens? We all know what happens. The president signs some kind of order or carries out some type of policy that the American people put him there to take care of, to serve, to change, to whatever. And you can have any one of these particular judges stop it. And how do they do that? Well, forum shopping. If you want to find someone that's going to overturn a conservative leaning president, a Republican president, well, you go form shop in Hawaii, or you go form shop in California or New York or something along them lines, looking for a judge that believes the way you believe, and you basically have that judge put a stop to it. Well, as we discussed, the problem with that now, well, first of all, that's a problem. Just these unelected people saying, hey, I'm going to override the will of a sitting, duly elected president. Outrageous, unbelievable. This is not, folks, this is not what our founding fathers wanted for our country. So the way it used to work, you have a problem, you have a case, no problem. You would go into the court of your particular jurisdiction. In other words, for example, I'm here in Florida, I believe Florida, Georgia, Alabama. We are in the 4th District Court. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to look it up, but it's the 4th court. It's just the particular jurisdiction, if you will, that we are in. So we would appeal to this particular federal court and say, hey, give us relief, give us some type of restraining order so that the president cannot do this or that. Well, it really has never been the case that a judge in Florida could bind the entire nation and de facto bind the entire world as a result of that, as far as the jurisdiction of the United States goes. Well, that's what that's what the president is asking you, a Supreme Court, to please rein these people in, stop it, and turn the clock back to the way that you originally set these things up. Okay. So that in a nutshell is what it is all going down. Hey, I want to say a quick hello to my friend Mark over at Sapphire Ridge News. Thank you for being here. He's got a great channel, and he has this great second channel. Mark, you can put the information if you like, where he's got these, I don't forgot the name of the fish. It's KOI fish, but at any rate, it's just a very interesting channel pertaining to fish and the way that he takes care of them and tends to them in his home out there in Alabama. It's nuance, and I love it. And that's right, Sapphire TROs. Thank you. Temporary restraining orders. Thank you for pointing that out to me. All right. Just quickly, I just want to give you a feeling, or just a quick snippet of what Donald Trump signed in this executive order here. It says, by my authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered blank. And then he goes into it. The privilege of United States citizenship is a priceless and profound gift. And he goes into a little bit of the history. I'm not going to go into it on this forum because I'm going to talk about it right now, and I don't want to dive too deep into this, but this is what he signed, and this is what has brought about all of the events for today. So, and yeah, Sapphire, I know you're in Montana. Sorry about that. And yeah, Koi Garden. Thanks, Sapphire. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. Trump versus CASA docket number. You see it on your screen right there. It's a consolidation involving executive orders 14160 signed by President Trump January 20th, 2025. One of the first executive orders he signed when he took, right after he took the oath of president, all right, which seeks to deny U.S. citizenship to children born on American soil unless at least one parent is a U.S. citizen or what they call a lawful permanent resident. Okay. The executive order has faced, well, we all know that it has faced immediate legal challenges and was blocked by lower courts for being unconstitutional. That is their assessment as far as it being unconstitutional. And we're going to talk a little bit about who's right or who's wrong on this. And I want to talk about exactly what happened during today's oral arguments. It may be a little surprising how I think this case is going to be decided. As you're probably aware, there is what's called a supermajority of conservatives on the U.S. Supreme Court, and we're going to take a look at them in a second. Basically, anything that comes before the Supreme Court generally is going to be looked at very favorably as far as from a conservative lens would be concerned coming from President Trump. It's the kind of court you want if you're President Trump, is what I'm trying to say. You have three other individuals who are definitely liberals. And in my opinion, that brand new justice, that Justice Jackson, that is one crazy, well, she's one crazy justice. We'll just let it go like that. I mean, this woman is cuckoo, and we can thank President Joe Biden for the gift that she is to the court. Of course, they had oral arguments today. Two key issues in this case right here. Donald Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. The order seeks to deny automatic citizenship to children born to U.S. parents who are undocumented immigrants or on temporary visas. This directly contradicts, at least this is the allegation by the other side, challenging the 14th Amendment citizenship clause. Now, we have to briefly read what the 14th Amendment is, what it says, and essentially what the U.S. Supreme Court has to decide. Now, this has been long-standing precedent in the United States. This goes back to a case called Wong Kim Ark. That is no joke. That is the guy's name. Wong Kim Ark. In this case is from 1898, if you can believe that. Have you all seen that movie on Netflix called Warrior? There is, it's a good movie if you haven't seen it. It's called Warrior. It's a series, actually. And in the movie, one of the main themes of the movie is that there's a lot of tension, in part because of something called the Chinese Exclusion Act that was signed around this time frame. So this was another legal issue that was kind of in the mix at the time. And that's one of the reasons it had to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. This individual's parents went back to China, yet he was born on American soil. So that kind of sets up exactly the events that happened in relation to this case decided all the way back from 1898, right? Nationwide injections, as we talked about, is the second issue. The Trump administration argued that federal district judges lack the authority to issue universal, aka nationwide injunctions, which halt a policy everywhere, not just for the plaintiffs. They requested the Supreme Court to limit these injunctions in scope, allowing the executive order to be enforced in parts of the country while the litigation continues. I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick little preview here. I don't think that that's going to fly with the court, but we'll see. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's going to fly. But I think that things look a little different in relation to the other subject on the injunctions. And I think we'll all agree that that's kind of the way it's heading. Let's take a look at this next slide right here. I want to touch briefly on this case on your screen. We've been talking about this Wong Kim Ark from 1898. As a matter of fact, I saw a video today. I think it's his great grandson. He's an older man himself right now, but he was talking about his great grandfather. And, you know, obviously his family's very proud that he was the main plaintiff, if you will, in this particular case dating all the way back to 1898. It says the facts. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco in 1873 to Chinese immigrant parents. So the facts are very important. So make sure you understand this. 1873, his parents were Chinese, all right? They were legally domiciled. That's kind of an interesting word to use because we've been talking so much about New York Attorney General, sweet Letitia James, and the problems that she is in for her principal residence in Virginia, aka a domicile. There you go. So they were domiciled in the U.S., but ineligible for what they call naturalization due to the Chinese Exclusion Act that we just discussed. When Wong returned from a trip abroad, his father, family went back to China, and then they came back to the United States. The United States government denied him entry, claiming he was not a citizen because his parents were not U.S. citizens. Wong argued that his birth on U.S. soil made him a citizen under the 14th Amendment. Now, what does the 14th Amendment say? Well, let me tell you what it says. It says the following: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So this particular language is exactly what the court has to look to in determining resolution for this case. Now, back in 1898, the Supreme Court had a decision of 7-2. You had 7 people say, hey, he's a citizen pursuant to the 14th Amendment. And then you had 2 justices, including the Chief Justice at that time, who said, hey, he's not a citizen. And their rationale for that is kind of interesting, and it's kind of the same argument that they're making right now. In a 6-2 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that Wong Kim Ark was a U.S. citizen by birth. The court's interpretation of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that's what this all boils down to, ladies and gentlemen. The following words, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, was as follows. And I don't want to bore us too much with the mumble jumble, but here's what I want you to understand. This is the key. In the United States, even today, if you're born on U.S. soil, you are considered a citizen of the United States. Now, the only exceptions to that is what you see highlighted right here, children of foreign diplomats. And you might ask, well, why are children of foreign diplomats an exception? Well, by international law, when you are a diplomat, you are not subject to the rules. You cannot be imprisoned by the country in which you're residing. So you would not qualify because you're not subjected to those rules. Does that make sense? So if you are in the United States and you're from Russia, you're a Russian diplomat, and you have a child on U.S. Soil, you cannot be a United States citizen as a result of that birth, simply because you, the baby, and the parents are not subjected to the laws of the United States. It's really just that simple. They also have an exception for children of foreign enemy invaders. That's kind of where Donald Trump's been kind of pushing this a little bit. And then members of Native American tribes at any time. Tribes were considered semi-sovereign entities, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. The bottom line is this was how the Supreme Court interpreted this decision all the way back in 1898. All right. There are, we have to briefly talk about, hey, what happens if they outlaw citizenship here as far as born? In other words, you're born here in the United States and you're no longer a citizen automatically. You know, what's going to happen in that situation? Well, I'm going to tell you. Also, I want to show you how the rest of the world handles citizenship, right? That may be something that most of you are interested in. All right. Now, this was part of the dissented opinion that they have here. There's two different Latin words. I'm not going to try to speak Latin on here, but there are two different types of citizenship. Basically, like in the United States, it's something to do with the soil. If you're born on United States soil, you're a United States citizen. I have heard of people that actually have been out of the country. For example, maybe they were on a military base or they were visiting family in another country, whatever the situation was. I've heard of people actually bringing soil from the United States so that when the mother gives birth, the child could be born on United States soil. I'm not making that up. That's true. Why is that important? Because in order to be president of the United States, you have to be born in the United States, or at least born on United States soil. I don't want to get down that rabbit hole either. It's just people take this stuff very seriously, and they should. The other way people are granted citizen basically has to do with your parents. In other words, if your parents in that example are Chinese, well, when their baby's born, their baby is a citizen. Most countries use kind of a interwoven of the two. And if it was overturned in the United States, that would be the kind of system we would likely end up with here in the United States. They'd have to come out and make rules as to who would be considered a citizen automatically and who would not. And we would probably be, frankly, more in line with the majority of the world, which, as I just said, has that hybrid system of where, this born on the soil and what is the legal status, what is the residency, aka citizenship of your parents. That's what all of that boils down to. As a matter of fact, here is the legal mumbo jumbo if you're interested. This Susolio, birthplace citizenship, and this other one is literally translated parent-based citizenship. It says here, most countries use a hybrid approach, tailoring rules to their demographic, historical, or political context. Do you get citizenship if born in a country, like different countries? Canada, for example, if you're born on Canadian soil, very similar to the United States, automatic citizenship for those born on Canadian soil, with exceptions for diplomats' children, just like in the United States. Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and Peru are also very similar to our system. Now, you also have some countries that they grant citizenship by birth, but they impose additional considerations. Again, I don't want to drill down too much on this. Now, some other countries like Germany, Japan, Korea, China, it is basically a function of the parent's citizenship. That's pretty well the way that they run it. And there are exceptions to the rules, like there are in a lot of different subject arenas. Overall, the takeaway here is most countries use a dual approach is probably the message that I want to make sure that we take away from this today. Okay, so let me check, see if anybody's got any questions. Well, I want to take a look at this first video. I have to reset up the screen though so that y'all can hear the sound. And we're going to drill down further on this because I think you're going to find it interesting exactly how these justices viewed the subject today. And you know, what's interesting about this particular court and the way it's made up is, you know, I can almost always predict which way someone's going to vote, which way the liberals are going to vote, which way the conservatives are going to vote. But in this particular case, when it comes to birthright citizenship, it's kind of making strange bedfellows, if you know what I mean. It's just interesting the way that it's being set up and the questions that were coming from the Pacific justices. So, Monique, thank you for being here. Hello to you. Thank you for being here. As usual, can always depend on Monique almost always being here, and I do appreciate that. Remember, folks, any questions, feel free to type them in the comments below. I appreciate everybody from Mix joining me today. I got 26 or so folks over there. Thank y'all for being here, and my normal YouTube family. Thank y'all for all being here. Let's go ahead and I got a few of these videos that I pulled pertaining to the subject that was before the court today. Let's listen to this, and then we will talk about it on the other side here. So let's go ahead without further ado, and let's take a listen.
Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. We start this hour at the Supreme Court, where arguments just wrapped up on the case challenging the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. That is the 14th Amendment guarantee granting citizenship to children born of parents who are in the U.S. temporarily or are undocumented. Now, though the court is not being asked to rule on the legality of birthright citizenship itself, this case is bringing protesters out today, among them members of Congress.
They are challenging the ability of federal judges to issue nationwide.
I don't know about y'all, that woman makes my just makes my skin crawl, you know, having to sit there and listen to her, but I apologize.
Injunctions. And like I said, when a bill like this came to our committee, like I said on the floor, if you don't like all the nationwide injunctions that have been issued against the Trump administration, then stop doing illegal, unconstitutional stuff.
These people crazy.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford, who's been following the arguments heard today. Jan, to be clear, this case is more about the power of judges and those nationwide injunctions that we've been talking about. So what have you heard from both sides?
Well, you know, as you said, I mean, what we've seen here are these challenges across the country to President Trump's executive order that would really scale back automatic birthright.
She said that the case today was more about the jurisdictional issues. I disagree. It's a citizenship case, but I'm not going to take too much issue with it because everybody is thinking about and worried about, as they should be, as to whether or not these liberal judges are going to have handcuffs put on them, as they should.
Right, citizenship in this country, which is considered historically a bedrock principle going back almost 150 years. So 3 judges decided that they were going to apply their rulings nationwide, not just to the parties that were in front of them, the people who were challenging the lawsuits in their courtrooms. They were going to apply them to everyone across the country, every single person. And that's the issue here. Do judges have that kind of power? The Trump administration is arguing that they don't under the Constitution, that one federal judge can't dictate national policy. But the people who are challenging birthright citizenship say that is ridiculous, because this is the exact kind of case where you need to have a nationwide ruling. It's a national issue. You're going to have people in different states having different rules for U.S. citizenship, and that makes no sense. So it's totally inefficient, they say, if everybody should just have to go sue on their own, file lawsuits across the country and courtrooms across the country. And I think the justices today, after over 2 hours of arguments, were really struggling with how to work their way.
So without too much mumble jumbo on the legalese here, they've been talking about like this, just different rules, what they call rules of federal procedure. And they had a long discussion today about, does this rule apply, and how about with class actions and all this other stuff. It just kind of gets into the weeds, and you basically had the liberals trying to make the case that, hey, if you effectively make these judges go back to the way it used to be, in other words, they couldn't bind an entire nation with one decision. They were trying to say it's going to stop the ability to have class action suits and stuff. It's just a bunch of nonsense, but that was one of their arguments they were making.
This one, Elizabeth. I mean, I think clearly there are 5 justices, a majority, who would like to end nationwide injunctions. They think that they're inappropriate, they're unnecessary. There are other ways to go about guaranteeing people's rights, and that is not it. The question is, how are they going to go about doing that? How are they going to write that opinion? It's going to be fascinating to see kind of whether they're able to. Maybe they're going to ask for additional brief.
I agree with that particular point. There are probably at least 5 judges that are willing to put limits on these lower courts and the scope, effectively the area that their injunctions could or should cover. And she makes a big deal, well, we don't know how we're going to do that. That's not exactly true. All they got to do is make the ruling valid only in the particular territory, the particular district that they're in. I mean, it's just easy. I don't see anything complicated about that.
In this case, we don't know. They're going to go back and they'll vote. They'll all now have a private conference and they'll vote on this. And then the majority, who's ever in the majority, they'll start trying to write that opinion. And sometimes they can change their mind. So this is one that I'm not going to say coming out of it what's pretty clear what they're going to do. They may not even know yet how they're going to resolve this.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated, Jan. But I'm curious, can you break down what a favorable ruling for the Trump administration?
I want to make one other comment about what she said. She is spot on that it is confusing. It's difficult to read the tea leaves on this particular case, these oral arguments. Normally, I kind of have a real good feel as to how they're going to vote. When I first was listening to this case, about halfway through, it was a little up in the air. I wasn't exactly sure which way they were going to vote on this, but after listening to everything in its entirety, I think I have a much more clear direction that it's going. But at first, it did seem very confusing.
In this case could look like and what it could mean?
Well, I think one way out, that if Trump is to win, what the justices and a majority of the justices would say is nationwide injunctions. And again, President Biden tried to end them. President Obama hated them. It's not a partisan issue. Nationwide injunctions with one judge kind of setting policy for the country are inappropriate. You have to stick to the parties before you. But there are other ways to go about it. And I think the court could then suggest, let's try, what about class actions where people can come together as a class and challenge those? So that would be a way of covering everybody without it applying nationally in the way that the judge would do as an injunction. Now, one of the justices, Justice Alito, said, well, what's the difference? But Justice Kavanaugh, another conservative, said rules matter. Rules matter, and the way we go about doing things matter, even if functionally it's the same thing. Functionally, it would protect people if they filed it as a class action. It's the same thing as a nationwide injunction, but it's a proper way of going about doing it. So that may be the way they end up resolving.
All right. That's it for that particular video. What I will say is, the comments I made kind of speak for themselves. I do agree with most of what she's saying, but I think I know how these people are going to actually vote on this. To kind of give a little bit of it away right now, what I'll say is that when it comes to birthright citizenship, I do think it's going to stay. I think you're probably looking at a 7-2 decision, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, the way it typically works is we probably won't have a decision till much later on in the year. I believe they can go all the way into July or August or something like that. Generally, they come out a little bit earlier than that, but again, it's up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court can do what they want to do when they want to do it. So I don't know how you all feel about that. I mean, we are all tired of the abuses in this system as far as receiving citizenship. I mean, come on, you got people that are coming here on vacation to have babies so that their babies are U.S. citizens. Something about that does not set right with me, and I'm sure it doesn't set right with you. But if they did change the system, it would cause a lot of issues and a lot of confusion. I get that. But because of the language of the 14th Amendment, the fact that we have a long history since 1898 of it effectively being the law of the land, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a heavy lift to get that overturned. But don't despair, my friends. I think you're going to find a much better remedy, if you will, with the injunction issues. So let's go ahead, without further ado, and let's take a listen to this here.
Big story of the day out at the Supreme Court. Skeptical of the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. Today, the High Court hearing oral arguments from both sides of this debate, all of it centering around whether a single district court judge has the power to block an executive order nationwide. Our chief legal correspondent, Katie Barlow, is outside the Supreme Court to explain more. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Marina, you set it up perfectly there. So today, during nearly 2.5 hours of oral arguments, the justices at times appeared skeptical of the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. The idea that when you are born on American soil, you are entitled to U.S. citizenship. That comes out of the 14th Amendment that was passed after the Civil War. It's been the law on the books for over a century. But the Trump administration, who's the one who made this emergency request to the Supreme Court, didn't ask the court to address their efforts on birthright citizenship. Instead, they asked the court to narrow nationwide orders that were put in place by 3 different judges, including one in our backyard in Maryland, basically blocking the Trump administration from enforcing their birthright citizenship definition nationwide. The Trump administration argues that it's unconstitutional for a single district court judge anywhere in the country to block the president from trying to do something nationwide. And this idea doesn't just apply to executive orders, as is teed up in this case. It would apply to a law or a policy. Now, on the flip side of it, and this is what some of the justices got into during oral argument, is what is the alternative? Justice Sonia Sotomayor posed the hypothetical, what if a president decides that gun violence is a national crisis and the president wants to take away everyone's guns? Will they then be allowed to do that everywhere except for where a single district court judge has issued an injunction that just applies to the party before them? So the justices really grappled with this question about nationwide injunctions and also, to some extent, addressing the issue of birthright.
She's exactly right. And that's an excellent point to remember. I know oftentimes when something doesn't go the way we want it to go, for example, let's just pretend that Donald Trump is going to be limited as far as, or he's just simply going, let's just say it this way, he's going to lose the citizenship fight that he has brought about with this particular EO, this executive order. Well, what happens if you have another president that comes into office and it's a Democrat, woke liberal president, and he says, hey, listen, I want to take away everybody's gun. And he just signs a executive order saying, hey, all the guns are now gone. You know, so the courts help us and they also hurt us. And this was one of the main questions that the Supreme Court was dealing with right now. And I think it was Chief Justice Roberts. He made a very spot on and let's just say eloquent point, because Sotomayor was basically saying, oh, it takes 4 years to get a particular case up here. And in that in that time, you have all these people losing their citizenship or losing their birthrights or whatever. And it was Roberts that said, hey, that's just not the case. As a matter of fact, the case before them right now had only been going on for about a month. And I think that was a well thought out response is essentially the way I looked at it. And I think that was spot on. So I want to give you a sample of some of the questions, some of the back and forth that was going on today. And I want to say real quickly, I love Justice, what's that guy's name? Oh, yeah, Judge Clarence Thomas. He's truly a patriot. Thank God for him. If y'all have never read one of his books, he has an excellent autobiography. It's easy to find. Just type in his name and see what books he has written. But he explains his history as a black man in the United States. And I don't want to give too much away. I mean, it's a long book, but it is a fantastic read. He talks about why he is the conservative he is today. Why, as a black man, he gets extremely upset with all this race baiting that you see nowadays, with all of these divisions in our society, these artificial divisions. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Somebody screams out race. If you look like me, you don't say nothing. Most people just crawl into a hole or they try to hide. I, of course, I'm not that way. I'm happy to have a discussion about whatever anytime. But most people are like that. And that's what he talks about in his autobiography. He's very clear that this system that a lot of minorities depend on or they want to take advantage of really hurts people. And one of the examples he gave is he went, I believe it was Harvard Law School. He went there, he put in the work, he graduated with honors, and he said the problem is most everybody in the back of their mind thinks, well, we would say today he was a DEI graduate. But at the time, the people would think, oh, it's because of affirmative action that you got that legal degree. And he says that just really, really chaps him really, really majorly. And he just says all that stuff needs to go. We have a society, it's not perfect, but we all are equal under law, under the Constitution, and we need to stop this nonsense about black, white, Hispanic, whatever. I mean, we crucify anybody and everybody that says one thing that someone else says is offensive or that bothers them. And I think he's right. I used to tell my kids, you want to be a victor, not a victim. And I think if you haven't read his book and why he is the way he is, I strongly encourage it. It's a great read. And if you're like me, you don't like to read, hurt your eyes, sit around reading too much, do what I do. Just listen to something like one of them audiobooks, where you just you listen to it instead of read it. Let's take a quick peek at this one entry from Breitbart News that was reposted by Eric Daughtry. I love anything to do, as I said, with Justice Clarence Thomas. He goes, man, I love this guy. And he's pointing out what we've been talking about today. So we survived until the 1960s without universal active judges nationwide issuing these injunctions. And that's the point that he makes. So let's just take a quick gander into this comment.
General, when were the first universal injunctions used?
We believe that the best reading of that is what you said in Trump against Hawaii, which is that Wirtz in 1963 was really the first universal injunction. There's a dispute about Perkins against Lucas Oil going back to 1940. And of course, we point to the court's opinion that reversed that universal injunction issued by the DC Circuit and said it's profoundly wrong. Now, if you look at the cases that the either party cite, you see a common theme. The cases that we cite, like National Treasury's Employment Union, Perkins against Lucas Oil, Frothingham in Massachusetts against Mellon, going back to Scott against Donald, and all of them.
Okay, you get the main gist of that. I just think his questions, the way he puts the questions to whoever he's talking to, is always so spot on. And you can see from the comments right here, Clarence Thomas is to be respected and admired. I mean, the comments for him is just off the chain. All conservatives love Justice Thomas, and I do too. I definitely echo that sentiment, as y'all can all tell. So I also want to take a quick peek over at some of the liberals. Man, you talk about freaking out today, especially Sotomayor. She was not a happy camper today. And you always know when they're worried, they know they're on the losing side of whatever the subject is, because you'll see that side animated, especially the liberals on the court, specifically Sotomayor, Kagan, and that new justice, Justice Jackson. Jackson, if you're nasty. Let's take a peek at this here. And it's a short clip. Let's listen to this.
Your theory here is arguing that Article 3 and principles of equity both prohibit federal courts from issuing universal injunctions. Do I have your argument correct?
We argue both of those. And
you argue both
bases.
of those?
Yeah.
If that's true, that means even the Supreme Court doesn't have that power.
The justices of the Supreme Court zeroed in on President Donald Trump's.
Yeah, that's not exactly true, the way she worded that. And that's what the lawyer for Donald Trump was pointing out. Of course, she is never too happy when someone points out something to her that she doesn't really have a counter to, or let's just put it this way: she knows when she's gotten slammed. It's really that simple. They know when they're on the losing side of whatever, and that's exactly what they're on the losing side of. So I want to tell you what my exact predictions are, because I don't want to forget to tell you that. So let me share this with y'all one more time here, and we'll take a quick peek at what my predictions are so everybody knows. All right. Just my predictions. We'll see exactly how well this all pans out. Okay. So birthright citizenship, where's it headed to? My prediction is the 7-2 decision reaffirming birthright citizenship. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think it comes down to excuse me one second here. I think it comes down to the fact that we have a long tradition of it being American soil. You are an American citizen, just like the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens, period. End of discussion. I know you may not agree with that. I don't necessarily agree with that in its entirety, but that's been the tradition. And generally, there is a Latin phrase for this. I think it's stare decisis, if I'm saying it right. But for the most part, the Supreme Court likes to stay consistent. That doesn't mean they won't change, but they generally like to be consistent over time. It builds credibility for the court in their mind. It makes the court look like an institution that can stand the test of time, if you will. That's exactly where they're probably going with this. I would think if Congress would get their act together, they could stop some of these traveling, for example, to have a baby on U.S. soil. I think there are things that Congress could do that the U.S. Supreme Court would say is constitutional. But as Donald Trump wrote this executive order, I just don't think it's going to pan out. And again, my prediction, we'll see if I'm right. I think you're looking at a 7-2 decision. And I went ahead and I kind of drilled down as to exactly why I think they're going to vote the way they think. As far as the liberal bloc, just a quick note on it. They appear strongly against the order. That was clear by listening to it. They raised questions about stateliness, due process, violating the Constitution, the fact that we have this long history, this long tradition in the United States of birthright citizenship, if you will. And then the other conservative bloc, if you will, they were not on board with the president's decision, the president's EO on this. And if I had to just go ahead and nail down, I think for sure that Clarence Thomas will support the president's EO, this executive order, and would vote to uphold this. But other than him and probably Judges Gorsuch, I don't think Kavanaugh will even back in. Kavanaugh is normally very conservative, as you know. So that's the reason why I'm going with an official vote of 7-2 on that. Now, on let's just say the nationwide injunction deal, all right, I'm confident that it's going to work in the favor of President Trump, which I applaud. I think that's going to be a great thing. But I think you're going to be looking at a 5-4 decision or a 6-3. I'm going to go ahead and go with the 6-3, but the Chief Justice, and especially Amy Coney Barrett, she is not always the most conservative, Barrett rather. She's not always the most conservative when it comes to deciding some of the cases. I mean, let's be honest about it. Her and Chief Justice Roberts are sometimes a disappointment to the conservative cause. It's just the way it works out. Sometimes you put someone on the court and you think they're going to be a champion for the ideas of the right, if you will, and it does not work out like that. And it works out that way when it comes to left-leaning appointees that end up on the court. You know, there's a lot of examples on both sides. They get on the court and they are not what they thought they were going to be when they got to the court. But I'm going to go ahead and officially go out on a limb right here. It's going to be 6-3 is my official prediction. It might be a 5-4. We'll just have to see how it goes. Clearly, the conservatives are extremely concerned about the president, any president, being undermined by one of 680 unelected individuals that can simply show up and say, hey, I'm going to overrule the president, a duly elected president of the United States. And I think it was Justice Gorsuch. He actually stated that, for the record. He was kind of, I would say he was trying to be kind and gentle about it, but he made a very astute point. He said directly, he said, look, the judges, I'm not throwing shade on any particular judge, but let's be straight up about it. They're human. They make mistakes. And I really have a problem with them being able to override a president of the United States, and not only for that particular location, but nationwide. So I think, like I said, I think it's a mixed bag, but that is exactly where I think it's going to go. I put a decision of 6-3 decision narrowing the use of the nationwide injunctions. To me, seems highly likely. So we'll just have to see if that prediction comes out the way that I think it's going to come out. Stay tuned. I will keep you posted on that. And yeah, Sapphire has his koi garden. I think that's the name of the channel. Just type in Sapphire Koi Garden. I think it will pull right up. Thank you for being here today, Sapphire. I definitely want to thank Rosemary for being here. American Nana, thank you for joining us today. Of course, Monique, appreciate you being here as always. And yes, Sapphire, that one representative makes my blood boil. There's 2 or 3 of them that really are just painful to the ears to even have to listen to, right? Sapphire says, Kagan telling the liberal attorney your arguments don't make any sense, okay? And I love Thomas too, says Monique. I wish he was the chief judge, right? I do too. You know, that's interesting. He would make an excellent chief justice. I think the Chief Justice Roberts lost my support, if you will, way back during COVID, when they would allow these bars to stay open, or these liquor sales stores to stay open to sell alcohol, because they were an essential, vital business, whatever the terminology was back then. But at the same time, they would not allow churches to stay open. And I think it was out of the state of Colorado. They had an appeal that went up to the Chief Justice, and he refused to take it. He refused to stay an order from the then governor of the state of Colorado, to basically close the churches. He would not override that. And in my opinion, that's unforgivable, in the sense that I'm not supporting the guy. And there's been other decisions that he's come up with too. So it is what it is. But that's a astute point there, Monique. Thank you. Trump appointed Barrett. Yes. That's why I have no respect. Yeah, exactly. Trump has appointed, I believe, 3 people to date. What is it? Barrett. And he's appointed Barrett. Of course, we all know about Neil Gorsuch, or not. Let me get their names here. He's appointed Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. That's right. Roberts, I believe, was appointed by George W. Bush, if I remember correctly. But they still have technically a supermajority of 6-3 on the court, and let's hope that they can keep that. We'll see how it works out. Folks, I appreciate everybody joining me today. If you'd like to help do something for me for free, if you're one of the 26 folks still watching on X, you can go ahead and hit the follow, whatever that button is on X, at Reach JR Dukes. And of course, right here on YouTube, at JR Dukes, my handle. You can do me a favor, subscribe. It would be great. And our friends on Twitch, thank y'all for being here. It's always a pleasure to come and join each and every one of y'all. I think I'm going to be gone for this weekend. I have a family event to attend to, but Lord willing, I'll be back right here with y'all sometime next week. Anytime you'd like to reach me, feel free to contact me at the information scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Until then, I hope that the Lord blesses each and every one of you, and that y'all have a good day tomorrow and a good rest of your weekend. Always say, keep that mind free. Never give up. Until next time, my friends, I am JR Dukes.